Hey, this is Jacob's Forge. Welcome to Forging on a Budget. I want to go over this right here, which is the first basic forge that I built. It's made to run out of charcoal until it's not a working forge right now, but I want to go over a couple things. So first off, this forge started off as one of these. Balloon Time helium tank. Got it at good old Walmart for 20 bucks. My wife was doing a baby shower and wanted me to spend $30 on helium balloons. Spent $30 buying balloons and I got this tank. I'm going to be turning this tank into a propane forge. I'll go over the reasons why when I build that one. So I'm going to go over this one. So seeing King of Random's mini forge, you guys heard about doing that, mixing that sand with plaster of Paris compound 1:1, mixing it in, casting it in. I used that, had angled in sides coming in here, so you can see where there's actually a lip right here to allow, in fact you can see some of that refractory material still remaining in there. Well, it didn't hold up too well, and I ran into another problem with forging that's dealing with the reason why I've gone to propane. But this little forge worked pretty good as far as it goes, so I want to go over the basics of building this, because this is a lot easier than what you'll see with those brake drum forges, simply because of the ease of taking and doing this. So took, obviously, just cut it right above the halfway point, because I wanted to, you can see that valve stem right there, plastic's all melted off on it. Reason for that being, I just wanted to be able to get it in there and go over it and have it coming up as high as possible. If I was to do this again, I would also put a table on the top of the forge. Let me switch this up here. Okay, put a table up here on top, simply because then you'd have a bed for bringing your coals in on here. So, there you go here. Now, in order to make this square pipe, and this is really where the budgeting comes in. This particular one I picked up because some people had put it out on bulk pickup day, saw it, grabbed it, knew I could make something out of it. So, I had a piece of angle iron, a fairly decent sized piece, and I knew I could use square tubing for my exhaust and for the air coming up into the forge. So I took that angle iron, cut it into 4 equal pieces, and then welded that all together to make a square tube. Now, it would have been, if I had to start from the beginning, I would not have taken and done it that way. I would have just bought the square tube. But I already had the square tube, I already have a welder, it's a wire welder, cheap one from Harbor Freight. Works really good. I don't, but it's beside the point. So I use that. Now, the biggest thing that you've got to do is you've got to have something that covers it. So what I did, again, and this is where the budget part comes in, I needed a piece of metal. Well, I had some black steel 1/2-inch pipe coupler. I took that coupler, cut it in half, flattened it out, and then welded it on either side, as you can see here. So it allows the air to come up on either side, and it'll keep the coals in there. So it gives me the good flow coming in here. Now, when I went to cut the hole, and I did this with a jigsaw, you could do it with an angle iron or with a cutter. I didn't have that at the time. an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel. I took and I cut, marked out a square, and then I just cut it from corner to corner, bent the flares up, because that way I would have more surface area right here to go ahead and weld. And as you can tell from looking at this, I am not a good welder. These welds, not very good. So I was able to get that on there, welded on there. Now this piece worked fairly well for what I was doing on here. There's other reasons why I've gone away from a charcoal forge. Now the other important part is needed somewhere for the inlet. So I got a 1-inch nipple, 1.5-inch nipple. That was 1 inch. Nipple on here. Drilled the hole out with a hole saw, with a bimetal hole saw, and that was just the same size, just big enough so the threads would go in there just a little bit. Welded it on. Now, here's where some people are going to have, well, let's finish this part off. I had 4, see on this top piece, these things with these holes in them. So I had 4, and these were galvanized. I know, not the best thing to work on. I sanded them off first with my belt grinder to go ahead and strip off all the zinc on there, which is the poisonous fumes on that, and then welded them on. Now these were straight bars that I then bent over on here, because that's what I had on hand, and I needed something to hold this metal plate, which I happen to have one on hand on here. This metal plate serves in here as a couple of purposes here. One, serves to block it. Now, a lot of your videos that you'll see out there will have you use just a piece of black pipe. If I had a large piece of black steel pipe that I could have just put a T on and then put a screw on, I would have done that. That's the easier way to build it. But I was working within a budget. I had to make this with stuff that I had on hand for the most part. So, again, this is what I had. You'll notice that this piece, a lot longer than what I need. It could be just that long, but this was the size of the piece of steel I happened to have on hand, so I just used it because it was the exact right width. So it'll slide in, it'll slide out, it'll stay in there, because right here is where the airflow goes in here. But because of this, if this builds up with a whole bunch, if charcoal falls down the hole, or you burn coal, you get clinkers in here or ash in here, it'll go ahead and you have that capability to pull this out and clean it. Now, putting a little handle in here so that you can grab it easier, putting a bolt in there or something would be a great thing. Cutting the extra length off, or torching this and bending it up so that you had something to knock on to tap it out would be a great way. If I was to continue using this forge, that's exactly what I would be doing. Now, the other trick with this is the blower. That's where I had to spend some money. With the exception of this piece, all of this was already stuff that I had on hand. Now let me show you my high-speed blower. Okay, if you caught that part at the first where I mentioned Grant Thompson and his King of Randoms and his foundry, know that initially he used a nice high-speed blower that he got at his local thrift store. This one cost me $5. Now, there's the other part where some people are going to have issues. Yes, this is galvanized pipe. 1 inch to 1.5 inch, 1.5 to 2 inches. That's what they had. If they'd had one that was 1 inch to 2 inches, that's what I would have gotten. If you have a plumbing supply store around you, go there, see if they have it. Now, the issue here that some people are going to have is this is galvanized steel. This is how this galvanized steel fits on here. The reason people have issues with galvanized steel, and this is something you always want to keep in mind, is the fact that galvanized steel is covered with zinc. That's what the galvanization process is. They put zinc on here so that the steel underneath does not rust. Zinc protects it from corroding. Problem is, zinc has a very low melting point and gassing point where it'll just burn off and turn into a gas. Zinc fumes, very, very dangerous. Thing is, you'll notice these still look new. This particular forge was used for a summer on here, and I did not have any problems. This never got hot for two reasons. One, the fire is all up in here, so the heat has to travel through here to get to here. This never really got hot. Why? One, distance. This is the bottom of the forge, remember. I've just got it setting up because otherwise I'd have to have it in a stand. Second thing, hair dryer fits in here. This is the reason why I have the 2-inch one, because that way it'll fit in there nice. I don't have to jerry rig it if I want to. I can take it out. This one burns out. I can replace it easy enough. Now, I can then take, never use one of these on heat. In fact, if you want to, you could open it up, take the heating element out. You don't want to heat the air up because you want volume. Hot air is going to take up less volume. Plug it in, turn it on. It's got a variable speed drive. You've got a low and a high. You can take and look for some that have a low, a medium, and a high. You know, just depending on their, but that's the cheap blower. There's other ways that you can get a blower. There's a lot of them out there. There's hand crank blowers if you're in an area where you just can't get electricity. Those tend to be more expensive. The goal here was to be on a budget. These fittings were not that expensive. If wanted to, saying this is just a 1.5-inch nipple, you could actually get away without this, without that larger coupling. It's just have this issue that you're dealing with, so you need duct tape or something right here to attach this, or I don't think this one's rusted together, so I don't think, yeah, it's rusted together. Or you can get this coupling, flare it out a little bit if you need to, and have this just sit in there, because it's gonna be just a little bit too small. Possibly put threads on the tip of this, you know, heat this up a little bit and thread that down on there so that'll glue in. JB Weld it. JB Weld works great for some things, so great for others. So this is my initial forge. Like I mentioned, I used the Grant Thompson's thing for doing on that. If I was going to keep reusing this forge, I'm going to go over what I would do. But you guys have an idea of what you can do on something like this. So let me over here. We're kind of looking in here. Now, there's fire bricks, which are not that expensive, and you just take and actually pick them up for fairly cheap. Let me see. Just put one there. Put one there. as you can tell, it would require some cutting, but you can get that in there. Get a little refractory cement in there, and that's your basic. Just a sec, I've got my alarm going off for stuff I need to take care of. So, there you go. There's your basic forge. You'd want to take and fill in the gaps with a refractory compound. Again, Grant Thompson one would work. And cut the bricks on here so that they fit in better using a masonry cut-off bit. Just mark them off, figure out the angles you're going to want to do them, but you want everything angled down so that you start off with a small. If you look down here at the base, you want that to be small, and then it'll come up, be bigger on here, and then you want to have the surface up here coming out so that you have more area to take and have your coals so you can rake them in there and build up a bed. But that's the basic concept, basic idea on here for building a charcoal furnace on a budget. As I said, the only thing I had to buy was the pipe fittings and the hairdryer. Not that much. So, you know, you can always go ahead and do this. I had sand on hand, I had plaster of Paris on hand. I used stainless steel wool that I had scrubbers on hand to go ahead and get that in there also to make sure that it would last longer. But that's the basics of it, man. This is not that complicated of a thing to build. There's a whole lot of ways you can do it. There's a lot of other people that go over brake drum forges. I mean, if you're going to use a brake drum, remember, this is why I don't like the brake drum forges, is because they're a circle and you want angled, you want everything tapered in. So if you're going to use a brake drum forge, you need to line the outside so that you get that straight edge that they're made with, and it angles down and in. They also tend to be really hard. So they're harder to work with, they're more difficult to weld, depending upon what type of one you get. So that's all stuff you've got to keep in mind on here with when you're going through and building it, plus you have the expense of buying it. If you've got somebody that can weld on here, great. If you don't, there's other things that you can do, because the basics on this is you need something that's non-flammable, that can hold everything together, some insulator, and then blow it in. Remember, you can always use dirt, kitty litter. There's a bunch of different things on here. This is just the basis of what I found out building it within the budget. It worked good for small projects and for what I was wanting to do. There's other concerns, other reasons. There's a reason why I'm building the propane. I'll go over that when I actually build the propane. As I said, I've got this other propane tank I'm going to be turning into it. You guys have a great day. Till next time, remember, if you're on a budget, plan first.